Hey folks, this is Screen Watching. My name's Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Folks, this is a very big episode for a number of reasons. Number one, 100th episode. Number two, we're going to be talking about Avatar: The Way of Water, maybe the biggest film release of the year. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But folks, I think that what you need to understand is that for this episode, Simon Foster has prepared something very special. He has a poem, like a sonnet, I think is really the way he described it to me earlier. It's pretty much about his relationship with this podcast, his relationship with you, the audience, and he's learned the Na'vi language in order to deliver this piece of art and culture. So, Simon, thank you very much for doing this. I think it really is above and beyond. And it's, oh, wait, no, sorry, we've run out of time. We don't have enough time to do it. Let's get straight into the podcast.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher, mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Folks, this is Screen Watching. This is where we talk about the things we've watched on screens. My name's Dan Barrett, joined by Simon Foster. Simon, mate, I'm sorry you had to cut the sonnet, producer discretion.
I understand that, and I realise I probably would have run into copyright issues with the 20th Century Fox and Lightstorm Entertainment people. So I appreciate that, but I will.
Also, decency and just can we actually get our ratings on the platforms and whatnot?
Mr. Barrett, just before we plunge into the Avatar episode, congratulations on 100 episodes of this podcast. It seems like only yesterday that you came to me and said, you over there in the corner, what's your name? And I said, it's Simon. And you said, let's do a podcast together. And after 100 episodes, I have few regrets. A couple of regrets. There's been a handful of regrets, but I've had a great time doing it. So thank you for all the work you put into it.
Question for you. Is it 100 episodes for both of us?
What does that mean?
I can't help but feel that I recorded an episode without you present.
Oh, yes.
I
I have missed one episode. That's right. It still went out. It still went out as a numbered episode, but we were traveling. We'd had a little bit. I think that was around the time of our little pup passing away, and I hadn't seen Elvis, which I think was the Elvis weekend. So I said, Dad, I'm just going to back out of this. And I felt bad about that because you, over the course of this podcast, have had a child, have moved house between two capital cities, and I thought, I'm holidaying in the Blue Mountains. I don't want to do a podcast. So I sort of backed out. So
look, fair, I get it.
And then we have the mystery podcast, which due to technical difficulties we didn't post.
Actually, there were two of those.
There were two of those, were there? Okay, so this is episode 103, actually. So that's just great.
Technically not, because they weren't published, but we do have 100 episodes that I have been on. And Simon, I look forward to congratulating you next week on your 100th episode. But all the sentiment aside, we have Avatar to talk about. Both of us have seen this extraordinary film. I know it's been the center point of your life since the first film came out. Everything else has paled by significance. And here including that aforementioned child that I had recently.
The child and the wedding and the marriage and the child and the house and all that sort of stuff. But hey, so good. What are we going to talk about?
So, look, Simon, I kind of feel there's only one thing we can talk about, which is the season finale of White Lotus.
White Lotus. I was so sure you were going to say The Good Wife then, and I was about to just duck off. No, The Good Fight, isn't it? The Good Fight this time.
Well, that was a couple of weeks ago, Simon. That's done with. Where this week it's about White Lotus, and there's some Avatar movie. I guess we could talk. No, guys, we are going to talk about the Avatar movie this week. Simon, how many other movies are out there in the marketplace right now for you to talk about?
There are none.
Yeah.
There's a few streaming releases, but there's the cinemas are bare apart from Avatar.
What about next week?
Nothing.
What about the week after that?
We're starting to get into the Christmas stuff, so there's a few Boxing Day releases, but I think all the Fox Studios and the exhibitors are all hoping that Avatar is still holding atop the box office.
So what I read during the week, and this is US box office, but I'm guessing it probably relates pretty similarly here in Australia, is that Disney have all the large auditoriums in the various cineplexes around the place all booked up for Avatar for the next 6 weeks. Wow. So there are no comparable movies coming out of any sort of, size or, awareness. Mm-hmm. So for the next 6 weeks, they've definitely got Avatar locked down. And then the next big films come out is the Ant-Man and the Quantumania of Quantumness, whatever it's called. Yeah. Which is another Disney film. So they're kind of going from their big blockbuster straight into what will probably be a very successful film for them as well. But yeah, really this is the Christmas of Avatar, and there'll be nothing else really to discuss around it, which I think is kind of interesting.
What if it isn't? What if this stumbles?
This is the risk for them. Yeah.
This is an amazing time, because we've spoken at length about how, when it's all said and done, only one film really sort of took off this year, no pun intended, and that was Top Gun Maverick. It was the only legitimate global blockbuster this year. Even Wakanda is sort of...
That stumbled a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that stumbled a little bit. So, and you're right, until Ant-Man, which, I adore the Ant-Man films, but they're second tier Marvel. They're not expecting them to do, Avengers numbers. And I know that with the awards seasons coming up, there's a lot of, everyone's watching the Babylon film, the Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie one, but that's not going to be a blockbuster movie. That's
one wouldn't imagine, no.
Yeah, so Avatar's got a lot riding on it. Avatar really has.
Yeah, look, it's just kind of incredible. And yeah, there's no guaranteed things. So they've got tracking, obviously, and everything's tracking pretty well. They're on, from what I understand, they're looking at possibly launching a $500 million movie this weekend.
Wow, that's extreme.
Which is pretty incredible. It's going to be playing more screens. I saw a number saying, I think 12,000 screens across the world.
Yeah.
Which is a record. There's never been a film that's opened as widely as this. So the recent champion title for it was one of the Avengers films, I guess the second of the last two-parter, whatever it was called, Endgame. Is that the name of it?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, come on, movie boy.
It's going to be our episode 101, where we look back at the first week of Avatar, which may be the really sort of newsworthy podcast that we do. It's an exciting time.
Well, look, real talk, if this movie collapses and it doesn't get anywhere near the level of box office it needs, I guess we're probably looking at the end of cinema as captured within these 2 episodes of screen watching. What do you think?
Oh, I think you're probably right. Exactly right. Society will just crumble around us.
Yeah, look, I would imagine there'll be looting in the streets. I imagine that, you'll probably have some sort of face paint on. You'll be roaming around in some sort of doof wagon type thing as inspired by Mad Max.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, I'll be taking the little Peugeot down there, the Peugeot hatchback and doing it up as full outback marauding gang style.
Yeah.
It's but when you look at we're coming out into a 100 episode negative, thinking about what happens if Avatar doesn't make money. I'm sure it will, but Disney's attachment to Fox and Disney's investment in 4 of these movies, it would be a gargantuan shift in the nature of the film industry as we go ahead. But are people going to love it? We're here to tell you.
Oh, look, I don't know if we can tell people if they're going to love it, but we can certainly say whether we loved it.
This will be the review segment.
Yeah, it would be, except I was literally just searching around trying to find the review sting, and I don't have it loaded or in a place that I can upload it quickly without anyone noticing. So instead of doing that, Simon, how about we embrace the fact that we've got video right now and we watch the trailer for Avatar: The Way of Water?
Wow, let's do it.
Yeah, look at this.
Think I'm crazy.
You have to lie in those big rocks.
But I feel her. I hear her heartbeat. She's so close.
So what does her heartbeat sound like?
Mighty.
We cannot let you bring your war here.
Outcast. That's all they see.
I see you.
The way of water connects all things. Before your birth and after your death.
This is our home!
I need you with me. And I need you to be strong. Strongheart.
Wow, so you really will believe that a whale can wail?
Pretty breathtaking stuff. He's quite the visualist. How are we going to do this? You want to run through the plot line very briefly? We don't want to spoil too much. What the hell? Let's spoil it for everybody.
Yeah, look, I think that everyone should know as we go into this, people refer to a spoiler-free zone. This is the opposite of that. This is the zone you come to for the spoiler overflow. Like, we've basically come here with our large mops, and we've got all the spoilers, and we've just shoveled them right into Screen Watching HQ, and we're delivering them right here on the podcast.
We certainly are the spoilerific entertainment, that's for sure. So, Avatar, The Way of Water, recaptures the magic of the original Avatar. Will it recapture the box office? Why don't you kick off this little segment, Dan?
Okay, so the plot of Avatar... Avatar, people saw it back in 2009. A revolutionary film in that it really upped the stakes in terms of technically what could be done on a cinema screen with 3D. You'll remember that prior to the release of Avatar, all these cinemas around the world that wanted a chance at playing this movie that was pretty much guaranteed to have pretty serious box office behind it. If cinemas wanted to screen it, they had to update their projection systems to be able to handle the 3D. Basically, audiences saw this. Jaws were agape. And what subsequently happened, because they made a huge amount of money, not just on the fact lots of people went to see the movie, but also they could do upcharging, which got people buying their 3D glasses every time they came in to see the movie. So basically, every cinema ended up making quite a fair bit of scratch out of it. Now, obviously, back in the day, Fox was the owner of the film and made a large amount of money off that exhibition as well. And that basically just inspired a whole lot of other Hollywood studios to say, well, look, it's expensive to film this natively in 3D, but we can upconvert it for about $10 million and make quite a bit more than that off the enthusiasm around 3D right now. So you remember for the 2 years that followed 2009, it was just 3D movie after 3D movie, and all of them looked terrible. and just very quickly diminished anyone's interest in 3D movies. So basically, cut to 2022, the release of this movie, we haven't really seen a 3D film that people have actually cared enough to know that it was being released in 3D to go to the cinema to go and see. So this is really not just the return of the Avatar franchise, but also the return of a fairly exciting, promising technology. And will we actually see it embraced properly going forward? And I feel the answer to that's probably no. Outside of this Avatar series of films, there's another 12 of them after this one, my understanding is. Plot-wise, Simon, do you want to talk about the plot?
Oh, yeah, I'll very briefly run through the plot. Jake, we're 10 years later. Jake Sully, played by Sam Worthington, is now a human Na'vi half-breed, and his wife, Neytiri, the wonderful Zoe Saldana, still the franchise's most valuable player in my estimation, have had to uproot their kids from the forest where they live and head to a coastal realm, a new tribe called the Metkayina, led by Cliff Curtis and by Kate Winslet, playing Tonawara and Ronald, respectively. They've had to do that because there's been a development amongst the human colonists, the Sky People, as they are called. The previously perished Colonel Kirich, I guess, is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure how.
Yeah, sure.
Something like that, who was played by Stephen Lang in the first film.
He was the cigar-chomping stereotype from that first film.
Very stereotypical, but did a great job. He has been re-engineered and resurrected as his own half Na'vi, half marine type of creature to get around the planet, attacking helicopters and attacking the human colonists whenever they get anywhere near it. So they're able to infiltrate Pandora and all the realms that exist within this beautiful planet and hunt down Jake. I guess in military terms, he's a traitor or a deserter. And also Kirich has a very personal grudge against Neytiri, who many will remember was who put the arrow through his heart at the end of the first film. Now, at any opportunity, Colonel Kirich will use the native people and the tribes of Pandora, or any one of Sully and Neytiri's kids as leverage to try and get to the two of them. And the whole thing culminates in a huge battle sequence which lasts upwards of 50-odd minutes. It's the entire third act that leads to, and if this is a spoiler for anyone you don't know these kind of movies, a dramatic face-off between Colonel Kirich and Sully. And that, in a nutshell, is the story. We'll get deeper into it as we go along, but that's kind of where we're at. And really, the whole midsection of the film is the kids, mostly, but also Sully and Neytiri discovering this beautiful coastal realm, which gives James Cameron free license to create these incredible underwater sequences that we'll talk about more as we go along. How'd I do with that?
Yeah, that's pretty good. So what people need to realize, this is kind of 3 movies in one. So the very first movie is kind of a bit of a recap of what happened previously, but also setting the stage for the next sort of iteration of Avatar movies. So really, you could come in on this one and have not seen the first one and still be more or less okay. You've been caught up enough to be able to keep going with it.
Yeah.
And look, there'll be lots of people who haven't seen it. There'll be lots of people who haven't seen it since 2009. Mm-hmm. Real talk, that's just the reality of it. Sure. So, yeah, I think they do a good job in terms of hitting all the beats, and some of the exposition's a little bit clunkier than it probably needs to be, but, they get the job done. And that's kind of your first, 45 minutes to almost an hour.
Yep.
What happens next is about an hour to an hour 20, which kind of just, holds all the action that we've seen previously. It kind of takes away the evil Avatar army that's coming after our heroes, and it really is just hanging out with Jake Sully and his family as they've now entered this new water environment that they're living in. And it's about the tensions that exist between the children in the village and Sully's kids and how they try to integrate in amongst each other. It's about them learning about the local I'm going to call them whale colonies, but they've got another Avatar-ish name. But the local...
They were called the Toucans.
The Toucans. But essentially just large whales that can also communicate, with subtitles, which I thought was pretty cool. The first time it happened, boy, did that make me laugh.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so what's
Do
kind
go
of
on.
fascinating about it is I think that it's that middle section that's going to it's going to divide the audience dramatically. So you're going to find people who are just pissed off with it beyond belief because they'll be squirming in their chairs. It won't really be what they signed up for when they walked in to see what was a 3-hour opus of big explodey things and tails and hair, like, follicles all touching up against each other. Like, that wasn't quite what they were there for. But I kind of feel that if this was a movie that was literally just about like one tribe being integrated in with another tribe in like this beautiful sort of tropical area, and it's about the tension that exists amongst them, like that would be a critical favorite. Like it would be absolutely what, people would go a bit gaga for. It would be considered bold and innovative storytelling, sandwiched in the middle of two very Avatar-ish sequences. I kind of feel as though it's maybe a bit too much of a departure for what the rest of the Avatar films are all about. But if you're willing to embrace the earnestness of the Avatar series as a franchise, because the first one's pretty earnest, this like is earnester in so many ways. If you're willing to go with that and just sit back and enjoy the visuals of them like in this very lush water world that they've created, like I think people are really going to get a kick out of it. But like that's going to be the dividing thing. And then that final sequence runs for about another hour, and it's a very traditional action sequence that's very similar to a lot of the things that James Cameron did with the Aliens movie back in the day. Like there's some very strong parallels there, even to the point where one of the daughters of Jake Sully is more or less a Newt substitute from Aliens.
Yes, that's all very true. Now, I think you and I are going to differ on how well Cameron handles that midsection. For me, it was a pretty dire sort of hour of movie storytelling. I agree with you that it had a degree of earnestness which can be synonymous with when Cameron tries to be serious. He sort of takes on a very po-faced form of storytelling that he's known for. But I think what really lets him down here is the dialogue that he uses. The fact that he turns this midsection into sort of two lots of teens fighting with each other until one accepts the other into the sort of fold, and they have to sort of find their the common sort of bond that unifies them. It's real, just bare bones, basic storytelling without any sort of the depth or emotion that was in the best parts of the first film. I also think those elements of the bond created between the Mekitani, I think it's pronounced, tribe, and the animals of the ocean was also trying to mimic the setup of that and the exploration of that in the first film, and I don't think it does that anywhere near as successfully. By the time the young man becomes best friends with the rogue toucan, the rogue whale who's missing a flipper, I thought, no, I've kind of seen enough of this. It went back once and then twice from the same well, and that blew the running time out to the film's detriment. I thought everything around that was pure Cameron in both the best and the worst ways, and we can talk about that more later. But yeah, I think for me it was the midsection where this film stumbled badly.
Yeah, so I would definitely say with that midsection, when the boy befriends the whale creature, I was perfectly fine with that. Like it was wonderfully silly, and I just embraced the spirit of it because I'm down with the way of water. But I do think that as that storyline expanded out and there was a lot of conversations about how the local people had a lot of animosity towards that whale specifically, and so that whale became an outsider, which that teenage boy related to because he's an outsider in his own family, and the obvious sort of parallels. But that's all fine, okay? But I kind of feel that as they expanded out a little bit more, as showing just the animus that the local community had towards this whale and their relationship with all the other whales, to me, that's kind of where it really just started sort of stretching the friendship that little bit too much. So I do think that the film would be better off if they'd cut maybe about 10 minutes out of that section. But by and large, I was willing to go with the very hard on sleeve, very hitting some beats we've seen before, but in a way that kind of felt a little bit just visually lush and a way into a story that, yes, is familiar, but also is one that, honestly, I haven't really seen that on screen much for like the last 20 odd years. Like, it's been a while since we've seen this kind of storytelling back on the screen. So, I don't know, like, I was kind of willing to go with it because it really felt like a throwback to a sort of cinema that just isn't really in existence anymore.
I'm going to sort of weigh in with probably my most troubling aspect of the film, and that is of James Cameron finally coming around to indulge in moments of self-referential. You touched on it there when you said one of the characters is kind of like Newt in Aliens.
Yeah. I mean, even the scream that she lets out as she gets sucked into like the sort of water vents is beyond, like, it is Newt, like, to the DNA core.
So he rehashes the whole Marine unit dynamic and the weaponry hardware of Aliens. He's got the teen hero
which he had done in like 2009 Avatar as well. Like, course, it's right there.
There's the teen hero exploits of Terminator 2 in there. There's the luminescent underwater wonders of the abyss. And finally, there's the water will have its way inevitability of Titanic. So, and in addition to those sort of broader storytelling and very recognizable themes, there's smaller moments, like one of the soldiers has a walking unit which looks exactly like the one that Sigourney Weaver gets in at the end of Aliens. There's just so many moments where I go, oh, he used that in this, and he's come back to that, and he's used that before. So it seemed like a very safe storytelling process for Cameron to go through, while he really challenged himself with all the visuals and the creation of the worlds, which I have no trouble with. They look stunning and they are beautiful, and I'll talk more on that later. I just think with the story and the unfolding of the story, I think all of the people that were under his command spent too many workshop hours with their boss, because it all felt just far too familiar for me to be the big sequel to the biggest film of all time after 10 years.
I don't know, it seems like a lot of the problems you got with this existed in Avatar 1. Like, it seems like that's sort of baked into it.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Well, I mean, I didn't even mention that the film itself does echo very specific beats of the first film and does it less successfully for me.
Yeah, but like...
I'm getting negative, and I can sense that, like, I don't want to be too negative about this, because on the end I actually on my website Screen Space I gave it a 3 out of 5 review, and I said I fell on the more positive side of things because it is such a groundbreaking visual work. I just wish that Cameron had sort of taken off the engineer's jacket, taken off the lab coat, and spent as much time on the story and bringing some depth to his story as he did with the images.
So we're going to talk about James Cameron a little bit later in the podcast, but I guess one of the things that's kind of maybe just frustrated me a little bit about the conversation surrounding the release of this movie is that it feels like there's a certain lack of perspective around the complaints people have of this one, as though this is the first time that James Cameron's released a movie with wooden dialogue. Which, have you seen every other James Cameron movie that's ever been James Cameron? Like, this has been a trademark of his from the beginning. His dialogue is tinny as it always has been and continues to be. Okay. And so I just see people going, oh, James Cameron's dialogue's terrible. But it's James Cameron's dialogue is terrible as usual. Should be the way these conversations are framed, but it's just kind of not there. And it just sort of feels that everyone's really coming at this. No, but it just kind of feels like... No, but it just kind of feels like everyone's coming at this as though these are suddenly new crimes of James Cameron's. Like, there's something that just feels a little bit odd. It's as though everyone's just sort of coming at this as though there's so much expectation that it's going to succeed. And it's almost as though people resent that to a certain degree. And so they're just looking for things that they can chip away at. And I appreciate that there's elements of the movie that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. As I said, I think this is overly earnest. And for a lot of people, particularly over the last 15, 20 years of Hollywood blockbusters, where people have grown to accept a large amount of cynicism in the movies that they watch, and very much from the Marvel template of things as well, where every 30 seconds there needs to be some sort of cynical sort of winking joke that the audience are in on, and it just kind of feels like that's kind of the expectation of cinema now. So for this to come along, it just kind of feels like such a departure from what we've been seeing as these big screen movies that I kind of feel there's people who've just kind of lost the ability to just come at it sort of cleanly. I also hear some of the complaints you've got about it, and then I'll sort of think about, you were more than willing to accept most of these same problems with Ghostbusters Afterlife, like last year when that came out. And I'd say that much of the same problems that this film has, that film had. But it just kind of feels like the weight of expectations just a little bit different on it. And so...
I don't think that's the correct example because I had a huge weight of expectation on Afterlife. But I do take your point that I am maybe bringing to this a lifetime of...
I'm not even just criticizing you on this. Like, this is just a very broad sort of a thing. You're just the person in front of me. Yeah.
I understand that. I come to this Avatar film with, a movie-going life that's filled with all things Cameron. 7 times I saw Aliens at the movies and didn't have any trouble at all with the dialogue in that or the action in that. I consider him probably definitely alongside Spielberg as arguably the most influential director of my movie-going life. So I come at him with a kind of understanding of what he does and does really well, and what he has done with the Avatar films is an extraordinary achievement in doing exactly what you say. He's taken this fresh, original property that wasn't backed by years and years of comic book adoration that opened up audiences for those films straight away. He's created this own extraordinary world and brought technical prowess to it like no other director has in recent years, if ever. You got to go all the way back to, I don't know, Cecil B. DeMille or someone like this who challenged himself with this kind of scope and scale. I don't think that necessarily gives him a pass mark with some of the dialogue. It is grossly sentimental and plays very safe. It feels like I keep saying the word safe because to me it feels like that he knows this has to play in every market in every country around the world.
Also, it does.
It's got to. This has to be a fully immersive experience for every person on Earth for these films to make money, and that's probably why he's a bit sort of hamstrung with the script and the dialogue that he uses. It's got to play everywhere, and I get that.
You know what? Sorry, can I just sort of take things sort of in a slightly different direction with it?
Yeah.
Which is that, financially, it needs to be able to play everywhere. But I kind of feel as though finances aren't really what James Cameron's primarily concerned about. I think he's genuinely concerned about this environmental message that he's trying to sort of run through this. And by making it as universal as possible, he's really trying to make sure that series of concerns about deforestation and other, environmental aspects are sort of playing globally. So I don't think it's necessarily a financial thing that's driving him here. I think it is maybe just a little bit more in terms of the messaging he's trying to convey within the film.
Is that as big a deal in this second film as it was in the first film? I don't think it is. I don't get the feeling that. I mean, the clan, the island, the coastal clan are entirely attached to the wildlife, and I get that. And the appearance on the scene of the Brendan Cowell character at the end, who's basically this gruff old whaler who's making a buck on the side, and Jermaine Clement, who's gets like 10 lines in the whole film, and that's about it. I get that there's elements of the anti-whaling and the ocean conservation movement as part of those scenes, but I just don't think it plays as heavily on those cards as the first film did.
Here's the thing. Instinctively, I just want to say that I agree. But then also, just then, I thought about what you had to say then. And they do spend about an hour to an hour and a half of this movie talking about anti-whaling. So it's a bit hard to say they're not necessarily concerned with environmental concerns when, it is so heavily an anti-whaling movie. But also... Yeah, I also feel that a lot of the stuff that he's doing with this movie is kind of set up for the next couple of films that are following as well. So I don't think it's necessarily that they've completely jettisoned the environmental sort of messaging. I think it's just that they've approached a different aspect of it, but also you can see from the sort of plot threads that they're dropping in there, which is talking about how people from Earth, the Sky People, are coming to more or less sort of take over the entire moon of Pandora.
No.
Yeah, so coming in and taking over, and they don't really care about the local people or the local wildlife. The people of Earth have pretty much trashed their planet, and now they're coming to take out another one.
Yeah. Okay, so the viewing experience itself, I should point out that I saw it as a high frame rate Dolby Atmos VMAX session. So I sort of about as high tech, about as Cameron would have wanted to see
as pure to his intent.
I think so, yeah. And the only experience I'd had with the high frame rate before was on Peter Jackson's The Hobbit, and it was terrible. I had exactly the opposite reaction to it here. I thought the intense clarity of it was a totally immersive experience. And I say in my review on Screen Space that it's probably as close to a mainstream virtual reality film as we've had so far, certainly in the high frame rate format. So what was the viewing experience like from you, and did it land as it should have in your eyes?
Oh, look, I chose a cinema that I knew would be displaying this in pretty much those same circumstances you watched it. I guess maybe the benefit I had was that I went to a 6:45 session and not the 10 p.m. session that you went to.
Look, I'm proud as an old man to stay awake until 2:00 and watch a movie. I was doing all right. So there was no tiredness in my reservations about this film at all. I was engaged. In fact, I was in the fifth hour of movie watching by 2:00 in the morning, because I'd seen the new Tom Hanks movie prior to that, which ran for 2 hours and 10 minutes. So I was bug-eyed by the end of this movie, but they're still digging it.
Good grief. I hadn't seen The Hobbits. This was my first exposure to high frame rate cinema. It was hugely exciting. Yeah. I was really taken with it. I mean, first of all, the 3D itself is an improvement upon what he did in 2009. He's got, 13 years of improvements technology-wise. The 3D was incredible. I think that in the first Avatar film, he was very much a filmmaker looking to eschew using those sort of 3D hallmarks you expect, where, a spear gets thrown in a direction of the audience and you're going, whoa, look, I've dodged the spear. None of that sort of stuff was in it. It was very much about depth, but it kind of feels like there was still a couple of moments which was about sort of allowing the screen to take over the auditorium. I don't think he does that at all here. I think it is just all about that depth experience, and the film is so much better off for it. But on top of that, mixing it in with that higher frame rate, particularly in the action sequences, where it just came alive in a way that I've just not seen cinema do. I was just really taken with it.
Yeah, the one of the other aspects, which I found to be a negative at the time, but I sort of look back on now and think that was kind of cool. The way he did it was introduced in the underwater world in almost like a travelogue style of filmmaking, in that these characters just travel through these amazing underwater places that were just extraordinary to the eyes, and the creatures he created. I'm keen to find out if he took time to actually study the biology of the creatures and how they form that way against the natural environment. And I just found that to be utterly beautiful. And even the whale stuff, which I thought was a bit naff, they look spectacular in their bone formation and their skin and all that kind of thing. So all those elements of it, all sort of the natural science element of it, that I'm sure he had a team of people working on for the best part of the last decade, was worth it. It looks fantastic.
Okay, I want to throw some quick fire, character questions, thoughts with you.
Sure.
Okay, this is a question that goes back to Avatar 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Why was the Stephen Lang character, Colonel Miles Qualtrich?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Why is that character played by Stephen Lang and not played by Bill Paxton?
What? How do you mean?
Well, because it just kind of feels like, if you think about Stephen Lang in that film, take him out and replace him with Bill Paxton. I appreciate that it's a bit hard putting Bill Paxton in a movie in 2022.
Yes.
There's a few logistical issues there. But doesn't it just kind of feel like the sort of role that Paxton would have played? I don't know why he hasn't done it. My only thought is he was deep into Big Love at that point. So maybe just contractually he didn't have enough time to go and film the movie.
I think there's such an affection for Bill Paxton. I think it would have been too hard to buy him as the sort of scar-faced, gruff Marine sergeant.
No, I don't know. I think that he could have gone for it.
No, he's too adored. By that stage, people loved him, even as the cowardly Hudson in Cameron's Alien.
Hudson was a hero. I won't hear a word against him.
Yeah, I know. And I thought there was a real clunkiness, and you mentioned this earlier in your review, the way they reintroduced Lang and to a certain extent Sigourney Weaver into this film with the video footage they use, and Lang explaining to his avatar self that he'd been.
It was all video game exposition.
That's exactly what it was. I know. One thing I do want to mention briefly before you go to the next question, the character, and I've got it written down here. I should find it and have it ready. The adopted daughter of.
Oh yeah, well, Simon, this is my quick fire. Let's just do this here. This is next on my list.
Okay.
Sigourney Weaver playing a teenage Na'vi girl character's name is Kiri.
Mm-hmm. Kiri,
incidentally.
That's right, yes.
What did you think about her performance? Because this is a woman in her early to mid 70s who's playing a 14-year-old girl.
So what I kept envisioning in my mind was Sigourney Weaver with all the dots on her face and in the green outfit and doing the whole motion capture stuff, acting opposite these kids and having to act. Do you think that's how they did it? Like she was actually involved in a lot of these scenes with the child actors? And
absolutely.
Her face.
That is 100% what happened.
I can see of all the performances in the film and you know, I thought they sucked the life out of Zoe Saldana's character a bit, and Sully was a bit one-dimensional. I thought Kiri and what Sigourney Weaver did with this character, who is 60 years her real-life junior, was brilliant. And you know, it probably won't feature too heavily in the award season mention, but it's certainly the best performance in the film.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I thought it was incredible. There's one sequence where she's actually performing against herself in like a bit of a dream sequence, which was just incredible to watch. But like what really caught me, and Sigourney Weaver, I think, was probably the best at this, although there was some really good moments with, Kate Winslet as well. Just in terms of the actual quality of the motion capture, capturing the performances of these actors, like it was just incredible. Like I was just constantly caught up with the fact that these weren't their real faces, that this is, you know, the computer animated characters. Like it was, it's the best that I've seen it outside of the Planet of the Apes movies, which incidentally, all of that came under the visual direction of special effects guru Daniel Barrett.
No, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so he was so he ran the Planet of the Apes films. He's run this as well. And just in terms of that motion capture, like they really did some amazing stuff with the furry faces of the Apes films. But like here with the smooth skin avatar, like it was just, you know, this is absolute next level motion capture.
As hard as I tried, Kate Winslet's character of Ronald, was the only one that I couldn't see Kate Winslet in. I could see Cliff Curtis in her husband's role, and you can certainly see Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana, but I just couldn't make out Kate Winslet underneath the motion capture, underneath the special effects stuff there, which isn't a detraction from the other performances. It was just a very different sort of, it was a very different look for her. She's playing an alien, Simon, you idiot. So.
Well, I mean, yeah, so I told my wife that it was Kate Winslet after the movie, and she was a bit surprised because I didn't realize that. And then also she hadn't picked up that Sigourney Weaver was playing the teenage girl. Like, she was familiar, but she just couldn't really quite lock into it.
Sure, yep.
But also, if you don't know, like, you just don't know. Like, it's...
And it was fascinating to see as Toucan the whale was Kate Winslet. Kate Blanchett doing the other stuff.
Oh, really?
As Toucan the whale.
Yeah.
No, I'm lying.
Didn't catch that, no.
All right, so we've got Avatar 2 The Way of Water. You got any more questions?
No, I mean, that's kind of all I really wanted to do. I thought interesting seeing Edie Falco playing the commander of the Earth forces.
Yep.
Currently, on the moon. It was kind of nice seeing Giovanni Ribisi back, even for like a second and a half.
Glimpse, yeah.
Yeah. Again, it was part of a video game, bit of exposition, but went with it. Brendan Cowell was pretty fun as the very Aussie head of the whaling group. And then you got Jermaine Clement, who a little bit wasted, but at the same time, like he was just such a welcome presence on screen that I was willing to go with it where it was. What I'd probably sort of say is that while I think that all the performances of the kids were actually pretty good for what was being asked of them, I do think there was a bit of inconsistency with some of the accents and how broad those accents got at times. And I don't know what the length of shooting schedule was on this one. And I know that this and the next film were shot back to back. So there's probably a lot more consistency on a day-to-day level that maybe got lost over the course of several months. But it did feel as though some of those accents got a little bit broad, especially
you think they had a few Peter Brady moments where things might have changed along the way, and
I'm not necessarily sure that's what's going on here, but I just think that, you've got young performers who don't necessarily have a lot of credits to their name, and getting them to have a consistent set of accents across such a very long shooting schedule, I think was maybe to the detriment of some of those accents.
I make a point in my review where I say the marketing, and we're getting sort of beyond the film here, but I guess it's worth touching on the marketing has very much focused on what a piece of pure escapism this is, which is a strange word to say. And the other huge hit of the year, Top Gun Maverick, it sort of offered jet plane joyrides beyond the clouds, and in this film, there's this other sense of pure otherworldly escapism, this time underwater. So, the film certainly offers that, the world building and the chance to completely remove yourself from life. It does so on a fairly spectacular level.
Yeah, look, agrees highly. That's really the strength of this movie. Yeah, for all the criticisms of James Cameron's tinny writing, there's nothing wrong about that. It's all spot on. He's not great at dialogue, and some of the emotions are just maybe a little bit too sort of shallow. But at the same time, he has crafted such an incredible visual world around it that feels so fully thought out, and just the conception of it is just beyond what I think we've seen from almost any other filmmakers at this point.
And we should point out that we haven't really touched on the huge spectacle of the ending, those last 50-odd minutes. But I can honestly say that, having lost me fairly considerably after that midsection, the film absolutely dragged me back into this this conflict that takes up the last hour of the film. It is tough and expertly staged. That's one of the things I love about James Cameron action shooting. He gives everything a sense of geography. You know exactly where the action is, and know exactly
you never lose the thread of it.
No, exactly right, and he does that with such ease and with such skill. That's really the high point of the film for me. So after 10 years, are we happy with where it landed? I'm going to say no, not entirely, in part, but not entirely. Are you okay with what delivers with The Way of Water?
Yeah, I think so. There's been a long-standing joke about me being one of the greatest fans of Avatar in the world, but realistically, I saw the film twice back in 2009, and I caught it again as part of the re-release that happened 2-3 months ago. So my exposure to this as a franchise isn't really particularly sort of that high. But look, essentially my argument has always been that you never really bet against James Cameron in terms of delivering something that has a lot of spectacle and just a lot of va-va-va-va-voom to it. And the film absolutely has that. I suddenly was feeling the time pressure of it, at the 2-hour 40 mark, whatever it might. Actually, I wouldn't have been that far in, but maybe 40 minutes into that sort of middle section, I was suddenly feeling it a little bit. But by and large, I was caught up in it. It was just so gorgeously rendered on screen that I was kind of there for it. So, thumbs up for me is...
Did you go the full 192 minutes without a toilet break, and be honest?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I made it through. I'm a big boy.
Yeah. I rubber banded myself. I had to tie it off, but do what you have to do.
No, it should help. It did help that it was a very hot day, and I think I walked into that cinema a bit dehydrated, so, perfect conditions.
It always comes back to urine here on Screen Watching, doesn't it? Always finish with the urine story.
Yeah. Look, so part of the thing around this is that obviously this isn't just a film that's an island upon itself. There's another 3 films that are definitely in various stages of production and post-production set to go. And based on the box office of this one is really going to depend whether there's a 6th and possibly 7th film. So we are looking down the barrel of returning back to this world for, the next decade.
It's lined up every Christmas, hasn't it? It's the big Christmas release for the next 3 or 4 years or something. And
honestly, I'm genuinely excited that next Christmas I'm going to be able to sit down and do this again and explore a different element of, it may literally be another element. Are we going to see fire next? Are we going to start going through all of that? we'll find out. But my understanding is that it's all working towards the idea that the Na'vi protagonists are going to be ending up on Earth and seeing the horrors that are... Yeah, so like we're kind of seeing this progression. And what I'm going to be curious about is how long are we actually following Jake Sully and his lovely wife, Neytiri, and like when are we eventually going to maybe see those characters pass on, and we're going to be seeing, I guess, the Sigourney Weaver character Kiri and her human beau, Spider, possibly leading the franchise at that point. Because I kind of think that's where this is heading. So
I think you're probably right. I kept looking at Spider and thinking of who was the guy with the sunglasses on who threw that giant party and became a celebrity for about 10
that'd be you're talking about Party Boy Corey Worthington.
Corey Worthington, no relation. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. But yeah, so he was good. He was fine, that young kid.
Yeah.
So
I think all the kid actors were actually surprisingly very good.
Yeah. All right, let's shuffle along to the 100th episode screen watching middle bit.
Hang on, Simon. Let's do a sting.
I'll sting.
Oh, wait, I've got to learn how this works. Sorry, new platform. I'm still figuring it out.
Here we are making fun of James Cameron, who's just done a multi-billion-dollar technical wonder, and we don't know which button to press.
Oh, and I found the reviews thing as well, so it's all okay.
We can drop that in later if we knew how. All right, the screen watching middle bit, 100th episode. We're going to have a look at the aforementioned James Cameron in very brief. We know we've been talking on quite a bit about the man, but we really should weigh in on his strengths, his weaknesses, and his best and worst movies. Lead us off, Daniel Barrett.
Okay, well, let's maybe just restrict ourselves. We're going to talk, each of us, to no more than 3 films.
All right, sure, okay.
Yeah? Okay, so my favorite of his movies is the first one of them that I saw, which is 1986's Aliens.
Okay, that was the first Cameron movie you saw?
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind, like, I saw it, like, on video, like, maybe 2 or 3 years after it was released. So, I mean, I was a kid. Like, you know, cut me some slack, man.
Okay.
Jeez.
Little fella. Sorry, little fella.
But yeah, I mean, like, you know, think about being like an 8-year-old and seeing Aliens, like, you know, it was brain popping at the time. Like, you know, I mean, even watching it now, like, there's very few better action movies that have ever been made than that film.
100%.
Yeah.
And as someone who was, you know, a few years older than you, when that was a huge year at the cinema for me, because I saw Aliens 7 times, I saw The Fly 7 times. These were 2 movies that came out the same year, and that just rocked my world. That still remains sort of my movie-going experience par excellence. So I get it.
Yeah. Look, and also, I mean, just think, like, we talked about, like, the tinniness of his writing, and as tinny as it was in that film, there was still, like, lots of lines of dialogue that just ring in my ear when I think immediately about Aliens. So just hearing, I believe it may be the aforementioned Bill Paxton saying, "Game over, man, game over."
Stop your grinning and drop your linen. Well, but see, that's unusual because that is tinny dialogue. That is sort of comic book action dialogue, but it's pulled off by great casting, an actor totally in touch with the director.
But I mean, tonally, it's different. It's an entirely different sort of beast. I mean, Aliens is so loud and throbbing, and you know, can I say throbbing on a podcast? Is that a problem?
I instantly felt uncomfortable when you said that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it is what it is.
Yes. So next.
So we're just doing okay.
You want to go back and forth? Let's go back.
Yeah, I thought back and forth.
Episodes, and we still haven't figured it out. All right.
Yeah, one day.
One day we'll figure it out. Yes, I feel all those same things about Aliens, but I won't repeat all that. For me, the starting point for my love for James Cameron movies was The Terminator. It came out at a time when I was just sort of young enough, but also old enough to get into those sort of movies, to go and see those sort of films. So it took on a kind of mythical proportion. To be able to go and see Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator was a huge deal. And apart from some clunky special effects, which haven't quite survived the decades, it still holds up as an extraordinarily powerful action film and shows, and in hindsight, you can see why Hollywood said, well, this James Cameron dude, he kind of knows what he's doing, so let's throw some bucks at him and see what happens. So, The Terminator, while probably not my favourite James Cameron film, is certainly one that had a profound and significant effect on young movie-going Simon.
Yeah. Next one for me, Terminator 2, just because literally, as I said, I discovered Aliens as like a 8 or 9 year old, and then lo and behold, as an 11-year-old, Terminator 2 Judgment Day comes out. Like, that's transformative, Simon.
Yeah, I bet it was. I was working for Columbia TriStar Home Video at the time, and we were at a conference in Vanuatu. And
Yeah.
it was decided that for the staff screening as part of this conference, we would go to this little town hall where they literally stuck a giant sheet up on the wall.
That's how Cameron wanted you to see it.
And they said, and now we'll be watching Terminator 2. And my first thought was, in here, really? and they projected it on the wall, and they had like 2 speakers standing by the screens at the front with the sound blowing back, and they must have shipped the crates to Vanuatu to show us this movie. But I have seen it many times since, and most recently when they did the full restoration and 4K remaster of it was pretty impressive. Doesn't fall on my list of favorite, like best 3 or 4 Cameron films. There's others that I've revisited before, but yeah, what he did with the groundbreaking effects work in that is remembered to this day.
Yeah, and that film's a very big reason as to why I've got a lifelong obsession with actor Joe Morton. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah.
I will say for me, the probably his most troubled production, although it's a toss-up between this and Titanic, but The Abyss for me was a movie that sort of rocked my world when it came out. I had followed the production of it through the years, and I'd sort of just got into the film industry at a certain level back then, and the buzz on The Abyss and what it might have been when it came down the pipe was extraordinary. I still think 4/5 of that movie are an amazing piece of cinema and an amazing accomplishment. The ending, I don't think even Cameron has ever got right. There's been 2 or 3 different versions of it that have dropped on VHS and then Laserdisc and then DVD, and it's been held up from getting a remaster for any number of reasons. But yeah, The Abyss features some, for me, arguably his best mixture of hardware and heart and effects work is right up there with The Abyss. So, plus it stars the wonderful Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, who sort of disappeared from our screens after the 90s, which is a shame.
Yeah. My final rankings, I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I think that the spirit of intent of us doing this segment was talk about movies that he is the writer-director of. Sure. But instead, I'm going to talk about a trinity of films, which he's really only there as either the writer or producer of. One of my all-time favorite films, a little film called Point Break, which was directed by his then-wife, Catherine Bigelow.
Yes.
My understanding is that a lot of the script went through James Cameron's hands.
I believe.
And when you think about how tinny some of that dialogue is through Point Break, but also that's part of the charm of that film as well. Absolutely. In a really big way.
Absolutely it is, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was one moment during Way of Water where there was a bit of a fight between some of the teenagers, and I was expecting to hear someone say, "Back off, war child, back off."
Okay, so what are the other 2? This is interesting.
So that's something that he was a writer and possibly producer on. Was another the Catherine Bigelow film, and that was the very interesting Strange Days, a film that doesn't work really in a number of ways, but it's a very bold, admirable attempt to do something that's really quite different and definitely a bit propulsive. So he does have like credited writer-producer on that. Also uncredited as the editor for the film, which I think is a bit interesting.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's
yeah. And people will hear a bit of that film in the opening credits for our podcast.
Of what? Strange Days?
Do I still have it in there? Maybe it was a thing that I cut out.
I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and listen to our podcast.
Maybe.
I don't even know what the films are.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what's in the opening titles. It was definitely in there for a little bit. And then the final thing was the Alita Battle Angel film, which was a film that he'd been trying to get up for years and years and years. Couldn't quite get it happening, but he ended up getting it up with Robert Rodriguez directing it with a script that had come through Cameron and produced it. They're apparently looking at doing a sequel now, which I think is a bit exciting.
A failure, but I think a really noble failure of a film. I thought there was a lot of stuff that he worked into Alita Battle Angel that he sort of also reused and sharpened for Avatar: Way of Water as well. I thought some of the stuff that Neytiri did with her bow and arrow in Way of Water was very much a lead of Battle Angel. So
Yeah. Kind of a bit of a disposable, forgettable film, but a pretty fun one at the same time.
yeah, absolutely it was.
Yeah.
Interesting that none of us mentioned his biggest movie ever, Titanic, which I still think is arguably...
Well, that's also not his biggest movie ever, but sure.
Well, sure, there was Avatar, but Titanic I still think is arguably the worst film ever to win the Best Picture Oscar.
Oh, come on, fair go. Fair go. Have you seen most of the Best Picture winners?
I've seen all of them, all the way back to Wings in 1917. I was there for the premiere of it. And I just think Titanic is a terrible, terrible movie. It was the moment when the terrible dialogue went from being passable and part of the film's charm to being very tinny on the ears for me. So, sorry, kids, sorry, ladies, but no, don't like Titanic. I'm going to weigh in with his dedication to restoration work and his the restoration. By that I mean of the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. His Ghosts of the Abyss
doco series.
Film. Yeah, from 2003. Which I saw on the IMAX screen here in Sydney. We were talking about that last week. It was an amazing piece of work, and his dedication to the ocean and all its mysteries has obviously driven his creativity, and he's done that with a passion. So all goodness to him.
Sorry, this is me trying to press buttons and it's just not clicking. Why, Simon? Why?
I don't know.
Okay, it's now frozen up. Okay, Simon, let's finish this up. This day in history, is that a thing we're doing?
Yep. The Simpsons, December 17, 1989. The Simpsons premieres on Fox TV as a full animated series with which classic episode?
Okay, so the episode is the Christmas episode, which has Homer buying Santa's little helper after he goes to the track. Well, I don't know if he actually buys him as much as he takes him home after, essentially gets Santa's little helper sullied.
Roasting on an open fire.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the name of it. I knew that it was Simpsons roasting, but I couldn't work out the rest.
Okay, here's the one up your alley. December 18, 2009, James Cameron's Avatar is released in the US. Now, which Oscar-winning actor did 20th Century Fox want for the lead role, but he passed on it, including a 10% profit share participation offer?
I believe that his recent run of Bitcoin promotions is very much him just trying to reclaim back some of that lost money that he didn't make from that Avatar film. We are, of course, talking about one Matthew Damon.
Yes, there is a clip of him at one of those Actors Centre sort of interviews explaining how he was offered 10% of the film but decided not to do it, and he may have some regrets about that. And finally, on December 21, 1925, the Russian classic Battleship Potemkin premieres in Moscow, featuring the iconic Odessa step sequence, famously homaged in which 1987 film?
Oh, come on. Come on.
One for you. It's one for us.
Okay, one for us. This is, of course, the great Brian De Palma film, The Untouchables.
It is indeed, yes. Okay, you got the happy birthday sting there? You found the button?
No, no buttons are working for me at this point.
No buttons. Okay, our four birthday buddies are December 17, 1975, Mila Jovovich. I don't know what that was.
Sorry, that was... I mean, I don't know how that even worked for you. Like, the button saying preview, it's baffling. I got buttons working.
December 19, 1980, Jake Gyllenhaal. December 21, 1983, Stephen Ewan. And December 22, 1968, the lovely Dina Meyer. So Miller, Jake, Stephen Ewan, Dina Meyer, all have birthdays next week. All have made films that featured one Bond, something that brings one of their films together, or four of their films together.
Sorry, wait a second. So who are these actors again? There was Dina Meyer,
Stephen Ewan, Jake Gyllenhaal, Mila Jovovich. And let me also say that it does fall within the spirit of this show, the avatariness of this episode.
I mean, I just immediately want to feel that the thing that links them all is one of the greatest just performers of any sort of artistic medium, Casper Van Dien.
Who I saw in a film last week called Mad Heidi that played as part of Monster Fest.
Really? He's still... Oh, sorry, on a Monster Fest film. Sorry, I thought it was going to be like a real movie. Yeah, gosh. What could tie them together? I mean, did Dina Meyer do anything other than Starship Troopers and played the Huntress in the Birds of Prey TV series?
Focus in on Starship Troopers. You've got it. You've got it in there.
Okay, Gary Busey or Jake Busey.
Move past it.
Okay.
What was Stephen Ewan's big film this year?
What was his big film this year? He did that movie with
Jordan Peele film about the.
Oh, nope. Oh gosh, I don't know. Like, I just feel the mathematical law of averages means that they've all been movies Michael Ironside.
They've all featured in movies that have had aliens in them. Dina Meyer, Starship Troopers. Jake Gyllenhaal was in Life, and Mila Jovovich was in a film about alien abduction called The Fourth Kind, but of course she was also in The Fifth Element. So, there you go.
Yeah, I was trying to think like if any of them have featured in movies that have been beaten to death by monkeys, but
no, that's a
okay.
For those that haven't seen it, not just Dan going off on a tangent. Mate, we're at the end of our 100th episode.
It was about time. Did you hear that? It shouldn't have played.
Yeah, I heard that.
Shouldn't have played. It came through my speakers. Very weird. Simon Foster, this has been the end of the podcast. Thank you very much. I look forward to celebrating your 100th episode next week.
Yep. I'm getting old too. Look at that greyness in the beard. One of the joys of doing this on Riverside.
You didn't have that many greys in the previous, 12 months. When we started this.
Episodes of podcasting with you isn't easy, you know.
Yeah, I get that.
Come out loud. Did I say that out loud? Sorry about that.
Wait, what? What? You prick.
You do your thing.
I should have written this down. You'd think I'd know it by now, wouldn't you? Folks, you can find me via my newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. It covers the big stories in TV, streaming, and film. You can also... What's the rest of this thing? I don't know.
Always Be Streaming newsletter, which recounts the big shows that launched
that very week. Yeah. But yeah, just hit up alwaysbewatching.com. There's a great newsletter. You're going to love it. You're just going to feel instinctively just the desire to share it with your friends, your family, in some sort of will. I'm sure you'll be leaving the digital remnants of the newsletter to children and maybe their children's children. It'll be passed down. This is an heirloom. So sign up now. Get something to pass on to the kids.
I'm on the Twitter at Simon R. Foster1. Read my words over at screen-space.net, where you can see my Avatar The Way of Water review and have a good read of that with some pretty pictures. Visit the Screen Watching Facebook page at Screen Watching Podcast, the Screen Watching YouTube channel, where you can see our interview with Eric Bogosian, the star of Interview with the Vampire. And we're also on Twitter at the moment, because I think that's got a future, at Screen_Watching.
Okay, Simon, we've hit the end of the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Folks, we'll be back next week. I don't know what Simon's going to talk about because there really are no movies coming out other than Avatar right now, but I'll have some stuff.
Yeah, I've still got a few choice words to say about the Hardy Boys. I didn't really cover that in that episode, so maybe I'll just revisit that.
Look, I mean, you could, but also I can control the presence, whether you're going to be staying in the studio that we're recording in or not. So all I have to do is just press that button, Simon. But anyway, folks.
Happy 100th, Dan. Bye-bye.
Hardy Boys. What a joke. Folks, we'll see you next week.